Okay, what I would say in response to that is, for me, the religious issue is kind of a red herring. I don't really think it's the fundamental issue. A lot of people focus on it, and I think there's too much focus on it. And I'll give you a quick explanation as to why I think that is. Is in Iraq in 2005 we had an election, and almost all of the winners of that election were Islamic parties. Okay, and in fact, since the 2005, it's been the same. You know, a lot of Islamic parties, they returned the majority of the vote each time. In 2005, after the elections, those people wrote a constitution, okay? And in the constitution, there's what's referred to as a repugnancy clause, right? So Article 2 says that no legislation can be passed if it violates the principal tenets of Islam, okay? So many people were upset and saying, oh, this means that Islam is going to take over and so on and so forth. So now the constitution has been enforced now from 2005 all the way to 2013. So it's been 8 years now, okay? That provision that's been in the constitution now for 8 years, that caused so much controversy at the time, that so many people focused on, hasn't been applied a single time in 8 years. Okay. Hasn't made any difference. Okay. However, what has made a huge difference is the rest of the constitution, which is completely dysfunctional. Okay. So we have a system of government in our constitution, in the Iraqi system, in the Iraqi constitution, which is totally dysfunctional. It doesn't work properly, and it's because of the constitution, because of the way it was drafted, and it was ignored at the time. Very few people paid attention to it. Okay. So I think the challenges now are, first of all, to come up with a good system of government that's democratic, that respects people's rights, that functions, and that allows for political parties to exchange ideas in a free environment, and for the best of those ideas to be used in order to determine policy, right? Okay. And you also need for the system of government to allow for sound implementation of policy, and for there to be a sound oversight of that policy, or the implementation of the policy. So I think that's a very difficult thing to do, but it's achievable. And I think our countries can do it. Okay? The other challenge from a political or social point of view is overcoming the fact that we went through 60 years of lack of democracy. Okay? Now, what does that mean specifically? Is that during the dictatorships in my country, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Libya, and Tunisia, we all had the same problem. Some countries were worse than others. You know, I think my country was probably the worst. Was the violation of rights, right? Was so acute, right? The mukhabarat, the secret police, were so prevalent and so violent, right, that they had a deep impact on the way in which we think, the way in which we operate, our modus operandi, right, the way in which we relate to each other. Okay, so in Iraq, just as an illustration, the mukhabarat was so powerful that even within your own home, at home, a father would not speak to his son in freedom. He would be afraid that maybe his son would be in the mukhabarat. Okay. Iraq is a special case. I won't go into the details of that. But what I want to say is that as a result of the mukhabarat's power and violence and its prevailing authority everywhere, political parties learned to adapt, right? So political parties would withdraw into their own little circles, okay? Would not trust anyone, would always suspect that there were conspiracies being mounted against them, would always think that people are being dishonest and not telling them the truth. That maybe when they speak to someone and that person is presenting themselves as being perhaps, an academic or a journalist or someone not from a different political party, in fact this person is a spy and is being dishonest. Okay. Now that attitude now is ingrained. It's there. Okay. It's still there today. Okay. All of the political parties that are active in all of our countries, they're not new political actors that suddenly sprung up since the Arab Spring started. Most of them, not all of them, but a large proportion of them were brought up and grew within this very terrifying environment. Okay, so today they still do not trust each other. Okay, and this lack of trust is really, really marked. It's really remarkable. And it impacts everything. So I'll give you a specific example. Is in Tunisia, right? So the lack of trust between the Al-Nahda party and many of the opposition parties. Okay, the Al-Nahda party, as you know, is the Muslim Brotherhood affiliated party, which obtained around 39% of the electorate. It's the biggest political party in Tunisia. Okay, so they're drafting the constitution and they're making some progress. Okay, recently, part of the constitution was amended. Right, the draft constitution was amended, and they put in a provision about the judicial sector. Okay, saying that the authority that manages the judicial sector should not only be administered by judges, there should also be civilians. Okay, non-judges within this authority. Okay. This is something that's done in many countries, because if you allow the judges completely to manage themselves, sometimes they have some strange ideas. Okay? So you have other mechanisms to try to control that, and one mechanism is to allow civilians, non-judges, to be part of the administration. Okay, As soon as this was put in, the opposition started saying, oh my God, this is terrible, okay? What this means is that religious sheikhs will be part of the administration of judges, and they're going to control the courts. Well, it's done in many countries, and if that's your concern, that maybe what you can do is you can negotiate with the other side to make sure that this won't happen, that you can allow for, civilians to be there, but, you put in certain guarantees to make sure that's not going to be taken over by religious authorities, okay? But, the fact that this was suggested and the reaction was so negative, it really impacts, the dialogue that you can have. Now, this is a very light problem. It's a very light illustration. It's just like maybe a minor issue, right? But if you put it in the context of Egypt, where the lack of trust between one side and the other is so marked that it leads to violence in the streets and dozens of people killed and so on and so forth, the results can be much more dramatic. Or whatever you say, as a political authority, whatever you say, okay, is interpreted negatively. Even if you're really being very honest and you're being very positive and you're trying to lead to a positive result, it doesn't matter what you say, because the other side will always find a way to denigrate you, to find negative interpretations of what it is that you're saying. That's not a very healthy environment. There are different reasons why they left. One reason why they left is, each individual that left had his or her own reason, of course. But but generally speaking, one of the issues why they left is because of the lack of trust. Another reason why is because it was a tactic, a strategy, to remove legitimacy from the process, and it worked very well because the Muslim Brotherhood, the Freedom and Justice Party, played right into that. Instead of trying to manage the process and trying to recover some type of legitimacy, they just went straight ahead, and they caused damage to themselves and, in my view, to the country as well. If the other side had completely withdrawn, if it was up to me, I would have said, okay, we're going to stop now. We need to find a way to recover this situation. I wouldn't have gone ahead just completely on my own. It was not a smart thing to do, in my view. Every country is unique, right? So the atmosphere in Jordan has changed. It's not a new atmosphere, but it's evolving, right? And the Arab Spring is part of the reasons why it's evolving.
Okay.
There are lots of dynamics. So there are lots of protests. People are very upset. They've been upset for a long time. The economic situation in Jordan is very bad. Also, the political and constitutional situation is not good, right? They had a constitutional reform process recently in 2011 where they reformed the constitution, but the essential problems are the same, which is that the king has a huge amount of authority and almost no responsibility. There's no way that you can hold the king accountable for any of the decisions that he makes. Okay, so a very clear example of this, and this is something that's not a secret, is that in Jordan there is no minister of defense. I don't know if you know this, but there's no minister of defense in Jordan. Okay, and yet there's an army, and so who controls the budget? Of course, it's the monarchy or the people surrounding the king. Okay, but you can't hold them accountable. Okay, so for example, strategic mistakes, for waste, mismanagement, and corruption, there's no way to hold them accountable, and that's not a real democracy, obviously, right? Okay, so they really need to recover that, and people are very upset in that circumstance. Okay, now the other thing is that a lot of the opposition in Jordan is affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood. Okay, they're not as, in my view at least, not as organized as people think they are. But they're affiliated. They're all affiliated to each other. Okay, so it's part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and even if they weren't affiliated directly, people associate them to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, right?
Okay.
So if you say that you're an Islamist and you refer to your religious sources and your source of authority, right? And they're closely aligned to the ones in Egypt, and that's it. People will understand that you're part of the same organization, even if you say that you're not. Okay. So as the Muslim Brotherhood flounders in Egypt, okay, it has an impact on the way in which those people are perceived in Jordan. Okay. So that's part of the equation as well. Is that if the Muslim Brotherhood had been performing very, very well in Egypt, and Egypt was on the road to recovery, and the economic situation was very good, and politically everything was wonderful, okay, then you would see a different side of the protests in Jordan, okay? But the fact that it's not happening that way means it removes legitimacy from them, you know, and it removes popularity from them, okay? Then you also have in Jordan, you know, liberal, you know, left-wing opposition. They don't really have much popular support, you know, and I know some of them personally, and some of them are very good people, they have very good ideas, and they're very upset about the situation, you know, but they don't command, you know, the support of hundreds of thousands of people, you know, they just don't, you know. So in that context, you know, the alternatives aren't really convincing, you know, nor is the current situation, you know, so something needs to change, but we don't know, you know, what the dynamic for that is going to be, okay? And the fact that there isn't a clear alternative today, you know, is obviously impacting the state of the protest movement.